Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. I am Timothy, and as always, it is my pleasure to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Thomas. Today, we are diving into a film that has been the subject of much debate and discussion among our loyal viewers. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tonight we are talking about Gymkata.
Gymkata. A movie so bad it's good. Or at least that's what Timothy seems to think. Personally, I found it to be a bit of a mess. But hey, let's not spoil the fun, shall we? Let's hear what my dear friend and fellow film enthusiast has to say about it.
Well, Thomas, as always, you are quite wrong about everything. I happen to think that Gymkata is a masterpiece of cinematic storytelling. It expertly blends action, comedy, and drama into a truly unforgettable experience. Plus, who doesn't love an underdog story about a gymnast turned secret agent?
Sigh well, Timothy. I suppose we'll have to agree to disagree on the subject of Gymkata. But before we dive too deep into our usual arguments about how much of a classic this movie really is, could you perhaps enlighten us plebeians in the audience with a brief summary of the plot? I, for one, am still struggling to remember any coherent storyline from my last viewing.
Well, Thomas, Gymkata, as you probably know, is set in the fictional country of Parmistan, which seems to be located somewhere in Eastern Europe or the Middle East. The plot revolves around Jonathan Cabot, played by Olympic gymnast Kurt Thomas, who happens to be a skilled martial artist and gymnast as well. He's recruited by some shady government agency to enter a deadly competition known as the Game, which is actually a thinly disguised plot to overthrow the ruthless dictator of Parmistan, General Zara. To make things more interesting, Cabot falls in love with Princess Rubali, played by Tetchie Agbayani, who just so happens to be the daughter of the late king and the only hope for peace in her troubled nation. Along the way, Cabot faces numerous obstacles, both physical and political, as he navigates through a maze of deceit and treachery. Eventually, with the help of his team of misfit allies, including an ex-CIA agent turned beach bum played by Richard Norton, Cabot uncovers the sinister plot to seize power and save the day. Now, Thomas, do you think you can remember anything else about this cinematic masterpiece? Thomas, I see you've managed to remember some of the plot details.
No.
Let me share with our lovely audience a little-known fact about Gymkata's production. Did you know that the famous opening sequence where Kurt Thomas's character, Jonathan Cabot, runs across a series of precarious obstacles while being chased by armed men was actually filmed on a soundstage in Los Angeles? Yes, my dear fellow. Despite the film's attempts to portray a dangerous and exotic setting, the truth is somewhat less exciting. But it doesn't detract from the thrilling chase that follows, does it? I mean, who cares about reality when you have stuntmen jumping over fire and cars flipping upside down on screen?
Sigh well, Timothy. As much as I enjoy debating the merits of using CG instead of practical effect, we should probably get back to our discussion about the differences between the movie and the novel it's based on. Now, my elderly British friend, do you remember if there were any significant changes made from the book The Terrible Game by Dan Tyler Moore?
Oh, yes, Tom. As a fan of both literature and cinema, I always make it a point to compare the source material with its cinematic counterpart. In this case, while the basic premise of an Olympic gymnast turned secret agent sent to Parmistan remains intact, there are some notable differences between the book and the film. For instance, in the novel, Jonathan Cabot is portrayed as a more cunning and ruthless character, willing to resort to lethal force when necessary. However, in the movie, director Robert Clouse chose to tone down the violence, focusing instead on the hero's journey theme.
Additionally,
the romance between Cabot and Princess Rubali is less prominent in the book, where their relationship remains more strictly platonic.
Well, I, for one, prefer the movie version of events. It adds a much-needed layer of humanity to the story, don't you think? Besides, who doesn't love a good old-fashioned action-packed adventure with some romance thrown in for good measure?
I suppose that's subjective, Tom. Some might argue that the gritty realism of the novel is lost in translation to the big screen, but I digress. Now, let us not keep our viewers waiting any longer. What did you think of the film's portrayal of Parmistan? Was it accurate, in your opinion? Or was it more of a Hollywoodized version of a real place?
Well, Timothy, as someone who has never actually been to Parmistan, I can't say how accurate the film portrays the country. But as a viewer, I found the setting quite captivating, with its mix of Eastern European and Middle Eastern influences. The use of vibrant colors and exotic locations really transported me to another world. As for the accuracy of the language and cultural aspects, I'm afraid I can't comment on that since I don't speak Parmistani. But overall, I thought the film did a decent job of bringing Moore's novel to life, albeit with some creative liberties taken along the way.
Well, Tom, speaking as someone who has read Dan Tyler Moore's The Terrible Game multiple times, and has also visited several countries in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, I must say that, while Gymkata does capture the essence of Parmistan, it falls short in some aspects. For instance, the novel delves deeper into the political turmoil and the struggle for power between the dictator General Zara and the legitimate heir to the throne, Princess Rubali's father. The movie simplifies this complex storyline, focusing more on the action-packed sequences and the romantic angle between Cabot and the princess. As for the language, while Parmistan is fictional, Moore did draw inspiration from real-world languages like Turkish, Persian, and Russian to create a unique tongue used in the novel. Unfortunately, this aspect was lost in translation to the screen, with the film opting for generic accents and dubbed dialogues. But hey, it's just a movie, right? We can't expect absolute accuracy from Hollywood adaptations.
Well, Timothy, you know how I feel about Hollywood adaptations. They usually butcher the source material, in my humble opinion. But let's not dwell on the negatives too much. What did you think of the casting choices in Gymkata? Did they nail it? Or miss the mark, so to speak?
Well, Tom, I must say that Kurt Thomas' portrayal of Jonathan Cabot was spot on. He brings a perfect balance of athleticism and charisma to the role. As for Tetchie Agbayani as Princess Rubali, while she doesn't have the same Hollywood star power as some other choices could have brought, she does an adequate job portraying the strong-willed yet vulnerable princess. The supporting cast, including Richard Norton as the rugged ex-CIA agent who becomes Cabot's mentor and AM friend, also delivers solid performances. However, I do have to mention that some of the accents and dialects used in the film are rather inconsistent, especially among the supporting characters.
But hey, it's a 80s action movie, right?
We can forgive them for artistic license, can't we? Well, Tom, speaking of accents, let's talk about the Parmistani accents used in the film. While some actors manage to maintain a consistent dialect throughout the movie, others seem to switch between different accents and even mumble their lines at times. Personally, I found it rather distracting and took away from my immersion into the story, but let's not dwell too much on the negative aspects of the film. After all, we are here to celebrate its many triumphs, aren't we? Now, moving on to another topic.
Oh, Timothy, how can you possibly move on when there are still so many flaws in Gymkata waiting for our critical gaze? But fine, if you insist. Let us turn our attention to the film's action sequences instead. As someone who appreciates well-choreographed fight scenes and stunt work, I must say that Gymkata does not disappoint in this regard. The gymnastic moves integrated into the martial arts are truly a sight to behold, especially when performed by an Olympic gold medalist like Kurt Tom. Do you agree with me on this point?
Well, Tom, while I do agree that some of the action scenes in Gymkata are quite impressive, especially during the final act where Cabot and his team face off against General Zara's henchmen in a thrilling climax, there are moments where the editing and camera work seem rather clumsy. Some of the fight sequences are shot so close that it becomes difficult to follow what's happening on screen. And then there's the infamous wobbly cam effect used during certain chase scenes, which, while intended to create a sense of urgency, often ends up causing motion sickness in viewers. But let's not dwell on these minor imperfections too much. After all, we are here to celebrate the film's many triumphs and its place in cinematic history, aren't we?
I couldn't agree more, Tim. Now, speaking of Gymkata's place in cinema, did you know that it inspired a number of imitations and parodies over the years? There's an episode of The Simpsons called Homer the Great, where Homer becomes a circus performer named the Great Louse Ini, who must compete against other circus acts for the approval of Mr. Burns. And then there's the 1986 film Alien from L.A. starring Kathy Ireland and an uncredited James Cameron, which parodies both Gymkata and E.T., the extraterrestrial. It's about a sexy alien who crash lands on Earth disguised as a surfer boy and, is pursued by government agents while trying to phone her home planet using a payphone. Yes, you read that correctly. A payphone.
Well, Tom, it seems like Gymkata's unique blend of gymnastics and martial arts has indeed left an indelible mark on pop culture. But speaking of marks, let me tell you about the time I met Kurt Tom during a book signing event in London. And thus ends another exciting episode of Tim and Tom's Film Nights. Remember to join us tomorrow for our discussion on The Never-Ending Story, third, Return of the Shadow King. And don't forget to leave your comments, questions, and suggestions below. Until then, have a great day, folks. Oh, Tom, you know I can never resist a good movie parody or spoof. And Gymkata certainly has had its share of imitators and homages over the years. One such film that comes to mind is Murder, A Go Gym, released in 1985, just 1 year after Gymkata hit theaters. The movie starred the late, great Samantha Jones as Jane Doe, a gymnast turned detective who must enter a deadly game of espionage and intrigue to uncover a sinister plot to steal top secret fitness secrets from across the glowed earth. The plot, which revolves around Jane's quest to become the world's sexiest spy, is riddled with puns and nods to Gymkata, for example. Instead of Gymkata, the villainous organization is known as Murder Go Gym. The movie also features some memorable sequences, such as a high-octane gymnastics routine set to the tune of Eye of the Tiger and a climactic showdown on an inflatable obstacle course. While Murder Go Gym wasn't quite the blockbuster success that Gymkata was, it did manage to find a dedicated cult following among fans of campy 80s action cinema and those who appreciate a good pun or two. And let's not forget the movie's most enduring legacy, introducing the world to the iconic phrase, gymnastically challenged.
Speaking of Gymkata's influence, there's also the 1986 film The Naked Gymnasticist, starring the then unknown actor John Doe. The movie follows the story of a struggling gymnast named Peter Pumpkinhead, who accidentally uncovers a sinister plot to steal ancient gymnastic secrets from an isolated island nation. With the help of his sexy sidekick, Jane Flexible, they embark on a journey full of dangerous gymnastic stunts and cheesy dialogue. The film is known for its ridiculous, yet somehow charming combination of action, comedy, and, of course, nudity. The movie was heavily inspired by Gymkata, borrowing elements from the original film, such as the gym pun in Uhum, the title, and the use of gymnastic stunts in action sequences. However, it's worth mentioning that the budget for The Naked Gymnasticist was reportedly only a fraction of Gymkata's production cost, which sadly showed in some of the more ambitious scenes. Despite its low-budget roots and questionable acting performances, the naked gymnasticist has developed a cult following among fans of B-movies and late-night cable TV. Its legacy can still be felt today in modern films that blend action and comedy with a dash of nudity, such as the popular Austin Powers franchise. So, Timothy, what do you think? Did I leave any other Gymkata knockoffs out of my bag of tricks?
Well, Tom, there's also the 1986 Italian film Gymnastic des Morts, which translates to Gymnastics of Death, starring the legendary action star Massimo Bottino. In this entry in the infamous Cemetery and Crypt series, a retired gymnast named Marco Polo is thrust into a deadly game of espionage and intrigue when he accidentally uncovers a sinister plot to steal ancient gymnastic secrets from a secret society of immortal acrobats. With the help of his sexy sidekick Penelope Flipside, they must navigate through a series of death-defying gymnastic challenges and cheesy puns to foil the nefarious plans of the evil mastermind behind the plot. While Gymnastic des Morts failed to capture the same level of campy charm as Gymkata, it did manage to include some impressive stunt work, albeit performed by professional stuntmen and women. The film's legacy, however, lies more in its cult status among fans of Italian exploitation cinema and its influence on later films that blur the lines between action, comedy, and gymnastics.
Well, Timothy, as we draw to a close, I can say without a doubt that Gymkata is a film that will be remembered for both its ridiculousness and its entertainment value. While it may not have won any prestigious awards or garnered critical acclaim, it has managed to establish itself as a campy cult classic loved by many. It's a testament to the power of imagination, cheesiness, and Kurt Thomas' incredible athletic prowess.
I must agree with you, Tom. While Gymkata may not be considered a masterpiece of cinema, it is undeniably a guilty pleasure that provides hours of mindless fun. Its mix of action, humor, and gymnastics has appealed to generations of moviegoers who appreciate the absurdity of life and who can resist a plot involving ancient gymnastic secrets, espionage, and a dash of romance.
So, folks, did you enjoy our spirited discussion about Gymkata? Let us know your own thoughts and opinions in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more fun-filled movie nights with Tim and Tom. Until next time, ciao.